Coming up next on the Jeff Crilley Show, we're going to talk to a national thought leader on the cannabis industry. And if you have some preconceived notions about what that industry is all about, they're about to change. His journey just ahead.
Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
Well, the cannabis industry has matured quite a bit in the last decade, and a big reason for that is it's starting to attract money and business-savvy people like my next guest, Matt Hawkins. He's the founder and managing partner of Entourage Effect Capital. Thanks for coming on the show.
You bet. Glad to be here, Jeff.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, you're a business guy, so what's a business guy like you doing in the cannabis industry?
To make money. I mean, that's really the bottom line. Is we saw an opportunity in 2014 after an exit of a multifamily strategy that we embarked on. One of the things I'd done in the downturn in 2008 was private lending. And then looking at some of those opportunities in 2014, we saw deals, particularly in Denver, with warehouse owners looking to refinance their mortgages out of a commercial mortgage into a private loan, which would give them the ability to lease their facilities to cannabis growers. 2012 is when Oregon, Washington, and the state of Colorado all went adult use legal in the state. And so, but even though it's legal at the state level, it's obviously it was and still is illegal at the federal level. So now, fast forward to today, you've got over 2/3 of Americans living in a state where it's at least robustly medically legal. So the landscape has changed. It is an industry that, believe it or not, based on those numbers right there, Gallup polls in some cases are close to 75% of people that are in favor of it being legal nationwide.
Yeah.
So we saw a big opportunity and we jumped in, and now this many years later, we've made over 60 investments out of 3 funds and a whole host of other special purpose entities.
Sure. Now, if there is a stereotype about the industry, it's kind of this mom and pop head shop in San Francisco. Tell us about the industry today.
It couldn't be more different than that. I mean, in fact, the ones that are the head shops, as they're called, are usually the ones that are doing it illegally. And but the ones that are doing it legally, that are doing it by the correct way, take advantage of the fact that you can be vertically integrated in most of these states. Meaning, you can grow it, you can manufacture it, you can package it, you can and then sell it both at the retail level and for home delivery, and so you can capture margins in all phases of the industry. Just selling out of a little retail shop really isn't the way to do it, and certainly not the way we invest.
Sure. And access to capital has always been a challenge to this industry. Talk about possible regulation that would change that.
So just from a historical standpoint, it's the industry, and this is arguably a $30 billion domestic industry right now, and that's really only counting about maybe 50% of the market that's converted already. So you're talking about overall maybe a $60 billion industry, but half of it's still operating in the illicit market. It's very interesting because it's a conversion of a market, really not a creation of one. But what's happened is you can only have this industry supported by high net worth individuals or family offices because institutional capital can't touch it yet. Their clients typically, or their investors typically, are pension funds and endowments, and it's very clear in their mandates that they can't invest in anything federally illegal. So there's this huge gray area now, and this industry, being as big as it is now, needs new capital to come in. And for us, all these years, we've been investing with those very people, the high net worth individuals and family offices. But we need institutional capital to come in and fix that. There is a piece of legislation that has been passed by the House of Representatives 7 times already and it's called the Safe Banking Act. There is an outside chance that it gets put into this omnibus package that's being worked on right now and would pass the Senate before the Christmas recess. We're skeptical at best that that's going to happen, but Schumer keeps saying that it's going to be in there. So we'll see. If that happens, it doesn't give a clear avenue for institutional capital to enter, but it's a start.
Yes. We're going to show you your website and scroll down it because I love the professionalism that you bring to this industry that's, I think, really needing leadership like yours. How many companies have you invested in since you started the...
Yeah, over 60. And, we've got, that's a little bit outdated now, that number, but we've got close to $200 million deployed into the space. Had some amazing successes, especially out of our first fund. Fund 2 is still a little bit too early to tell what the return profile would look like. And we just finished raising our third fund and, trying to take advantage of the opportunities that exist because it's a depressed market right now for the very reasons I just said, is that if there is no capital, companies need capital to take that next step because they're mature now. I mean, the ones that we work with now are and they need fuel to grow their positioning in the States.
Matt, money obviously follows money. Are you starting to see more people like yourself entering this space?
Believe it or not, it's the opposite, is that we're one of the longest tenured and definitely most prolific investors in the space, and there's not enough of us. I mean, we work with a lot of the contemporaries of ours in the industry to try to bring in as much fresh capital as we can across the board, and it's not easy. Because of the fact that legislation didn't pass in these 2 years, the Democrats had control of the Senate and House, a lot of people have left the industry because they just don't see it happening. It's very frustrating.
Has it become a partisan issue? I mean, aren't there Republican governors?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually, it's one of the few bipartisan issues. And it's probably why it's becoming so hard for it to pass, is that there are the far right still, Mitch McConnell still won't embrace it. But there's a representative in South Carolina, for example, Nancy Mace, who just got reelected, who is sponsoring a legalization bill. So a lot of these people like her look at it as a states' rights issue, look at it as a way to bring in capital to fuel the state's growth, and remove the veil of illegality at the federal level to leave it up to the states.
And when I talk about Matt being a thought leader, he's often called on by the networks. We've got some video of you on CNBC. That's got to feel good. I mean, they've got a lot of people to choose from. Tell us about your passion for educating people, because there are misconceptions.
There are, and it's becoming... What's interesting is that that was a couple of years ago, and yes, it's very exciting and very great, but we're at a point now where education is absolutely required and necessary. And so doing things like this has become a big part of my job, because it's also, not only is it educating the general public, but it also, we need to convince people in Washington too.
Sure.
And this is also a safety issue. I mean, all of our companies, there's a huge misconception about the banking situation. So all of our companies have banking relationships. They're just with credit unions or municipal banks or state charter banks, but the big banks won't touch this, and there are no lending services. So it's really just taking deposits.
Sure.
But the problem is that a lot of these smaller companies are having a hard time opening bank accounts, even with the ones that we get access to through our companies. But and that causes a situation where there's a lot of cash running around. You can't use Visa or MasterCard, and so that becomes a safety issue. You got a lot of robberies, and unfortunately, with the whole situation with COVID and there being a lack of enforcement, that's followed the cannabis industry in a big way. We can't seem to get the level of enforcement we need, both when there's incidents occur and in advance of just shutting down the illicit operations in California in particular.
And we can't really continue this kind of patchwork system where it's legal in this state and it's not legal. And I was reading a couple of years ago that there was an issue with the people who are trying to do it legally are getting taxed, and the people who don't want to pay the taxes are just...
That's the other problem, is that the states where it's legal now have looked at it as an opportunity, as a way to basically rape and pillage the industry, and the ones that are doing it the right way. And then you have the ones that are doing illegally that have no taxes. Like, perfect example, the state of New York just passed last year, and they haven't even issued licenses yet for retail shops in the state. But if you go to Manhattan right now, you see all these pop-up shops that are just like eBay. They're just head shops, and they say they're legal, but they're absolutely not. They're all completely illicit, selling, weed. God knows where it came from. The other thing that's great about the regulated industry is that there's seed and sale tracking. You know exactly what was put in it. You know exactly how it was grown. You know the THC content and all of this. There's so many reasons why that this should be legalized at the federal level for these very reasons. Sure. It's a lot of a safety issue.
We should also tell you that Matt is very popular at cannabis conferences, where he's giving some real concrete information to the people that are trying to do it legally. Tell us about this conference that you were at recently.
Sure. Benzinga conference is probably one of the biggest business conferences of the year. There's this one in the MJ BizCon in Las Vegas, but the Benzinga one is really more geared towards the C-suites of the cannabis companies themselves. And so when I got asked to do this, it was an honor. But it's really just more about doing things like this. It's just I find myself being somewhat repetitive in some of the things I'm saying, because I can't make any progress, so I'm going to keep saying it. So.
Well, it seems like every election cycle we see another state or two adopt it. It's not like you're going to put the genie back in the bottle.
No, there's no way. It's impossible. I mean, even when Colorado passed in 12, and setting Washington and Oregon aside for a second, but Colorado, by the time 2015 came around, they were paying for students to go to school. They were there was new money in the budgets for improved infrastructure. They can't get off this now. It's impossible. There's no way they could do it. And they converted a large swath of the illicit market pretty quickly. But the illicit market still has a stronghold in at least 30 to 50% of the business in Colorado. And just think if states like Colorado and California, this is what I say all the time, if they would just realize that if you would reduce the tax burden and the regulatory red tape on the legalized outfits, they then could pass that savings on the consumer, and people want to buy the legal stuff. It's just there's a price discrepancy.
Sure.
So then at that point, you convert a large swath of the illicit market, the state gets more tax revenue, and everybody wins. But for the life of me, I can't figure out what some of these states, California in particular, what they're doing.
What's happening here in Texas?
Well, as long as Dan Patrick's your Attorney General, you won't see cannabis in the state of Texas. It's just, for whatever reason, and the way the state's set up is that he controls everything that gets to the Senate floor, and he's just a staunch opponent of it. There is a sliver of legality at the medicinal level. They keep creeping the THC content up a little bit, and they keep expanding some of the uses of it. But for the longest time, it was for children with severe epileptic seizures, and that was it. Now they've expanded it somewhat to a lot of other for pain and spasticity, but not enough.
Yeah. Well, I imagine when this eventually gets federalized, companies like yours, which have been on the ground for almost a decade, have a great advantage.
We think so. We are in this this lull right here of trying to get fresh capital in. And as a firm, we're trying to decide how to navigate that, because until something happens federally, whether it's the Safe Banking Act or some other larger piece of legislation, new fresh capital is going to be hard to come by. So while we want to be positioned to where we can partner with large institutions to take advantage of these opportunities, it's hard to say when that's going to be. So that makes it a little bit challenging.
When you're out trying to raise money, is there still a stigma attached to it?
I would say that it's funny. Usually when I'm out raising capital, if it's a quick no or a quick yes. I mean, if someone hears what I'm doing and they don't have an interest in this, I'm not getting a meeting. Yeah. So it's gotta just, and so usually if I get in front of somebody, they at least want to be educated, they want to learn about it, and I feel like there's at least a very good chance of having a meaningful conversation.
Sure.
But there's still people that say, yeah, I'm out on it.
Okay.
So, but to your point, the stigma has definitely been tamped down.
We've almost out of time, so final thoughts. What would you like to leave people with?
I'll probably go back to what you said at the beginning, is that, just trying to change the misconceptions that are out there. A lot of it revolves around, the banking that I mentioned. It involves the overtaxation at the state level. The fact that even though this is a bipartisan issue, it seems hard to get over the goal line. But the biggest thing that I want to share is that stat I gave about 2/3 of Americans living in a state where it's at least robustly medically legal. Last point is that, my mom, for example, has had fibromyalgia for years, and for, almost over a decade ago, she was prescribed opioids, and she didn't know any better, but she got hooked.
Right.
And she's now completely off of that, and now I literally sometimes break the law by doing it, but I bring cannabis back for her from the states where we have it legal, and that's all she takes now.
Wow.
And it manages her pain. And so there's a lot of, yes, it's a recreational product, but the medicinal uses of this plant, we don't even know the half of yet.
Mm. Matt, thank you for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom with us. We're going to end with the website, which is entourageeffect.com. The great Matt Hawkins, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for now. We'll see you next time.